This episode of the Beer Bound Podcast is brought to you by Rolling Hops Beer Tours.
Hey everybody, Garrett here from Rolling Hops, as always joined with my partner,
Andy.
We're here to tell you guys about our virtual craft beer tour offering. With what's going on in the world, unfortunately, we haven't been able to run our historical craft walking beer tour, so we've pivoted to taking the virtual experience of craft beer directly to you guys. Wonderful for team building events, corporate events, even just a night out or in, for that matter, with your friends and family. And we're doing this online.
Have any questions about the beer tours or want us to tailor make an event for you? Just shoot us an email or send us a message on any form of social media. Rolling Hops, you can find us everywhere.
RollingHopsBeerTours.com is where you can get a hold of us, and we'll see you guys soon.
Cheers. All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Beer Bound Podcast. We are very excited to be joined by Dave Longbottom, owner of Flora Hall Brewing. Flora Hall can be found in Canada's capital city, Ottawa. The brewery's proprietor, Mr. Longbottom, spent decades traveling the globe, always seeking out the best local taverns and watering holes and sampling the drink, food, and hospitality on offer. Flora Hall is the synthesis of these experiences, launched to provide Ottawa with a unique new drinking and eating locale and built to last. The brewery opened its doors in 2017 after a year-long restoration of its building, originally an automotive radio repair shop built in 1927. We're excited to learn more about Flora Hall and its connection to Ottawa's thriving craft beer scene. So without further ado, we welcome Dave to the Beer Bound Podcast. Hello, Dave.
Welcome.
Good to see you guys, and thank you. And I'm glad that's the last of the Mr. Longbottom. I know I got gray hair, but there's no need for that formality. So I'm just gonna remember Dave now. So yeah,
we'll stick to Dave.
Dave it is.
Yeah. Dave, can you start us off? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe your experience with, sounds like you've done a lot of traveling and experiencing beers all over the globe. Can you tell us about yourself and your connection to beer?
100%. I mean, I've pretty much only drunk beer in my life, as far as I can think. You know, other than those ill-fated attempts at other things, beer has been the thing that I've always enjoyed and always come back to. And as you said in your opening, my beer tastes have been informed by a lot of travel. I'm an engineer. I worked in other industries for many, many years before I opened Flora, and those endeavors found me in every sort of country all around the world, different places, many places where I couldn't speak the language. And I would just find, after a long day of meetings or business endeavors, I would just find a beautiful little corner bar or a little backwater bar or some sort of dark tavern or a place, and just sit and watch and enjoy the atmosphere and try the beers that country had to offer. Now, in particular, I did spend a couple of years living in England. I have English roots, so that's where I probably sunk my teeth most deeply into beers that were not Canadian, because I was born here and spent most of my life here, but I've worked and traveled elsewhere. And those were the beers that I was finding around the world were the beers that made me excited about beer. As much as I love 50, and I drank a lot of 50 in my day, so it's got to be good for you. I'm still alive in my advanced years here, but it's other beers, other flavors, other interesting profiles that really got me fired up about beer and got me interested in doing Flora Hall when I decided to do it.
Well, can you go back a little bit further, Dave? Where are you from in Canada?
So I'm from the nation's capital in which my business is situated. I was born here and I still live here. And that's a rare thing in Ottawa, to be honest. I mean, a lot of people I meet in Ottawa are from elsewhere. They're here for various different reasons, and they all kind of fall in love. They fall in love slowly, but they fall in love with Ottawa ultimately. I fell in love with it when I grew up here. And I've been elsewhere and spent lots of wonderful time elsewhere, but I always find myself coming back home, right? And so the idea of opening a place in Ottawa was also very much informed by my love of the city. And it's like, okay, well, what am I going to do now? I was retired from my previous businesses. My friends weren't. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to start a project. Oh dear. Okay, and there's one of my friends calling. It's bad. This is bad podcast etiquette. So I'm going to turn that off. My
Popular
apologies.
guy.
Yeah, bring him in.
It happens. I've heard it happen on professional television, so there's no shame in that. So yeah, and I've also lost my train of thought. But the message was simply the idea of building a place in Ottawa that would add something to the community and that would be permanent in nature was very attractive to me, and that's why I kind of got Flora going. I found this wonderful building that is almost purpose built to house a craft brewery, to be honest. There aren't that many industrial buildings in Ottawa, but I found a real gem right in the middle of town. It's Centertown. It's named Centertown, and it is Centertown. And it was a real pleasure to sort of turn that building into what it is today.
Mm-hmm.
It looks gorgeous. I was checking it out online. It looks absolutely beautiful. So you did a fantastic job. Yeah,
it was pretty derelict when I found it. It was empty for 10 years. So as you said in your open, it's short of 100 years old for sure, but it's a gorgeous space, and it had really strong bones, and I could see that. It was a big undertaking to turn it into what it is now, but I could see the potential, and it was a pleasure to just rescue it because it was on the scrap heap. Like that, ultimately that building would have either just died under its own weight from neglect and decay, or somebody would have come ultimately and knocked it down and put up a few apartment buildings, or a few apartment units rather. And it was something that I took a lot of pleasure in when we were creating it, because as I say, there aren't that many of those buildings in Ottawa, and it was great to save that one.
I think maybe, Dave, if you can tell us a little bit about Ottawa in general, just for folks who maybe haven't been to our capital city. You being an Ottawa native is pretty cool. I think Garrett and I, we really do see craft beer and craft breweries as sort of an attachment to a particular neighborhood, whether it depends on whichever city that may be. But can you tell us a little bit about the evolution of Ottawa since your childhood, how it's expanded a little bit? Tell us maybe a little bit as well on kind of why Ottawa has become a really big craft beer town into the 21st century.
Yeah, so I think the sort of reputation of Ottawa in other cities in Canada and perhaps even around the world is that of a sleepy government town. That's what, if you ask somebody 25 years ago, they 100% would have said, been there. It's a few nice buildings, parliament buildings. There's this, there's that, but it's pretty much a sleepy government town. But it couldn't be further from the truth, to be honest. It's a wonderful, vibrant city. It's extremely multicultural. It always has been. We benefit from the fact that all the embassies are here, so we've at least always had a really good international food scene here. It's improved vastly as more immigration, as more people settle in Ottawa and so forth. But we've also moved from a place that really, from a drinking point of view, that only had taverns to a place that has amazing bars, restaurants, and other establishments. And if you look at Ottawa now relative to when I was growing up here, the differences are stark. It's a diversity of international restaurants, a diversity of people. We've got the mix of restaurants from the street level right up to the fine dining and everything in between. But what was important to me with Flora was getting a place that was really rooted in the community. And that, to your question about craft beer, that's what craft beer is all about, in my opinion. Like, craft beer is meant to be a neighborhood and beyond, but largely speaking, a neighborhood rooted business. And so when I set up Flora, I was very focused on having something that was local and stayed local. So I'm sure we'll talk about, lots of different aspects of craft beer in Ontario and how I see it, but Flora Hall was all about building something that was for the neighborhood, for the city, and very, very rooted in Ottawa.
Yeah, we sort of same sort of motto with us. Like when we work with a number of different craft breweries, and yeah, it's all about local. It's about your community, supporting your local community. So the fact that you're also supporting that, yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah, and we've, when we set it up, it was important to me to make connections with the community. So, and then this is not unique. This is not unique to Flora by any means, but I think you find craft breweries in general to be really good citizens of their community, and they're contributing to charities that are local. They're contributing to whatever causes are connected to their establishment. And again, bars do that, neighborhood bars do that. The bars that we probably all love going to are the ones that do that best, whereas you can walk many other establishments and the personality is not clear. The personality is connected to the corporation. And I've got nothing against corporations. I made money in business. I understand corporations, but when it comes to a place that you want to go and have beers with your friends and your family and your community, it's more about like an establishment that clearly understands where they are and who they are and what they're connected to. And that's very much part of the Flora Hall kind of culture is to be a place that people come when they're celebrating. It's a place they come when they're not celebrating. It's a place they come when they're upset. It's a place they come when they just need it really is a second home for them. And that's sort of runs its way through everything that we do, including the beers we make, including the people we hire, including the food that we use from our kitchen. It's all driven by that desire to be connected to the people who live around us.
Yeah, to be a go-to spot, right? I guess it's the objective is to be a place that you don't go to just have a drink, or you don't go to just get something to eat. It's like a place you go to share that experience with, to feel something more than just consuming a drink or eating food, something to that effect.
And the whole idea of craft is to be connected to the people who are making the product. And so
for sure,
I'm, and this is where I do differ from some of the larger craft beer makers. You can make craft beer and you can scale it up, or you can make craft beer and you can stay really very focused locally. And I choose to do the latter, because I want the people who drink Flora Hall beer to be able to interact with the people who make that beer. And I want the people who make that beer to be able to interact with the people who are drinking it. So most of the beer that we make and sell is sold through our own tap rooms. We do sell beer through the other great restaurants and bars that are nearby. Most of them are places that I love to go, and that's how we kind of choose them. When we talk about whether we should add a tap or not add a tap, it's whether we want to go there? Do we want to go there and drink? Do we enjoy going there? And being more than me, but me and the other people that are in the business. And that's how we decide upon it, because we really believe that craft is meant to be small. It's meant to be fresh. It's meant to be, a la minute. It's like, okay, that beer was in the tank last week and I'm drinking it this week. And so that's why I've kind of disavowed some of the channels that are available to us in Ontario. And I just sell my beer through our own taps, through our friends' restaurants' taps, and then out of our retail store that's part of the same operation, the same building.
So Dave, it's suffice to say that you cannot find Flora Hall beer in the liquor control boards of Ontario or the beer store.
That is true. That is true. And that is never going to change, because I don't see those channels as well suited to what we're doing. And again, I don't want to I don't want to, everybody has a different outlook on this. And so
For sure.
many of my colleagues in this industry have chosen those channels, and they're doing fine with those channels. I just don't see those as channels that are well suited to the beers that we're making. I think that there's too much time, I guess, that elapses between the tank and the mouth when you go through channels like that. So, and I've had beers in people's breweries that are wonderful, and then I'll taste that same beer from a can that I buy in a liquor store in a different geography, and I'm like, wow, that's not the same beer. That's not the same beer. And I fear that. And my head brewer, Rod, shares that philosophy. And that was one of the things we talked about when I was hiring him and bringing him into the team. And he's very much part of the foundation of Flora Hall. You know, he feels the same way about that. He wants to make sure that he brews a beer, and by the time it gets to the glass and to the person's mouth, it's the way it was supposed to be. And unfortunately, in Ontario, we don't have the luxury of going quickly to another retail establishment and getting the beer fresh. In Quebec, which is right next door, they have a different setup. Certainly, they have the equivalent of the LCBO. They have the SAQ. But if you want to sell to a retailer, so somebody sets up a nice corner shop, a dépanneur, and they're really focused on beer, they can buy directly from the breweries, and the breweries feel confident, therefore, that their product will be sold quickly and will be sold expertly, and it will be consumed fresh. And so they do it. We don't have that luxury in Ontario, so I just say, no, I'm not selling that way. I'm going to sell the way that we can ensure that the beer, when it's consumed, is the way it was supposed to be. And yeah, that's a bit of a soapbox issue for me, but that's the way I feel about it. And other people may have a different view. I don't know. And I've had many people say, hey, Dave, I love your beer. I want to have it in Kingston. And I'm like, well, I can't get it to you. Now, part of it is also that my brewery is inside a building in the middle of town. So I built it to scale to work for this way of thinking that I'm talking about. And I don't have this massive brew house that I need to feed. I look at it differently. I built a brew house, and then I can produce beer for the people that I want to serve. But if you've got a massive brew house, then you've got to find a channel for your beer. And then that sort of, in Ontario, that de facto means you're selling through the beer store or the LCBO. That's it. That's the only, those are the choices we have. And I wish we had other choices. And if we keep talking about it and lobbying for it, then that may come to pass someday. But I think until it does, I won't be selling my beer any other way.
Fair enough. And actually, I'm sort of happy that was brought up. I was checking out your website and your blog, and I saw that one post on, I guess it was a National Post article on like interprovincial liquor laws, and you were quoted on it. And I was going to ask you, what's your take on that? But you've already obviously provided your take on that, which is great. And I'm all for, easing of any restriction, obviously between provinces, right? We're one country. Why can't we break down some of these borders a little bit? Let the beer flow.
let the beer flow. So I agree. 100%. Like even though I may not choose to ship my beer to British Columbia, it should surely be possible for somebody in British Columbia to order my beer if they want to order it directly from me. But again, I would still subscribe to this idea that they got to be able to get it in an expeditious fashion so they can drink it quickly and enjoy it. And so the article you're referring to was from right at the beginning of our enterprise, actually. And it was a time when the case was in front of the Supreme Court. The individual, Gerard Como, was stopped at the border between Quebec and New Brunswick. I think it was Quebec and New Brunswick. He's from New Brunswick, but he was in Quebec, and he was buying some beer. He had his trunk full of beer, and he drove across the border to New Brunswick, and the RCMP stopped him and gave him a fine and took his beer. And so he protested, which makes a lot of sense. Now that beer was Coors Light, okay, so take it. But you know, the point was valid. It's
Took his beer.
How is it not possible for me to go over there and buy beer for myself and da 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 da? So we brewed this beer with another awesome brewery over on the Quebec side, Brasserie du Bas, Canada, and they had started actually pretty much the same time we did. And I came up with the notion that, okay, we can't move our beer across the border, but we can move our brewers across the border. Probably even that would be disallowed, but anyway, we did it anyway. We moved our brewers across. They brewed in, you know, their guys brewed in our shop and we brewed in their shop. They sold the beer that we brewed and we sold the beer they brewed. And we actually named it after this fellow, Gerard Comeau. And it was really all about just shining a light on the insanity, especially when you're in Ottawa, because Ottawa Hull, Gatineau is one city. It's one city. And yet I can't sell my beer to a bar owner in Quebec without going through massive amounts of bureaucracy and control, price control and expense. And it just makes no sense. And we have to, ultimately, we as consumers and citizens and voters and beer drinkers have to break that stuff down, because the governments are really not thinking about it that way. They're thinking about controlling the tax revenue. I got to make sure I get my money, you know. And there's a way to get the money without, you know, depriving us of the opportunity to drink good beer from somewhere else. You know?
For sure. I'm all for it. Definitely with you on that, Dave.
Yeah, Dave, you got to think that those pieces of interprovincial bureaucracy, they really are an entity of the 20th century. And now with this boom of craft beer in particular, they really are archaic. Are you optimistic that this legislation can be changed, that consumers will sway politicians to say, hey, this really just doesn't make sense in the new ecosystem we're living in? Or are you a little bit pessimistic in terms of thinking, well, the government wants their tax revenues, they've been doing it this way for so long, things
Yeah, no, I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic because the power of the power of the people is evident. And I think the issue is that 20 years ago nobody cared about the issue. Nobody, you know, the beer was all the same from province to province to province. So as much as if you're from the East Coast, you're from Newfoundland, you might like to drink, I think it's Black Horse, I think they've got down there, or maybe it was Kokanee from out west or whatever. But it was more nostalgia than actual flavor profiles, because all those beers are the same. They all basically taste the same. They are all the same. But now the beers are not all the same. And you want the ability to, hey, I was on vacation in Saskatchewan and I had this amazing beer in Saskatoon, and I'm here in Ottawa and I'd like to just order myself a little 2-4 and get it shipped over. Why not? So I think people, now that the products are so diverse and attractive, they're going to become more interested, they're going to become more vocal, and ultimately those rules will change. We've seen liberalization of the liquor laws in Ontario during this pandemic because some of it was driven by governments trying to make it easier for people to make a living during this crazy time. But part of it was, you know, but it will be lasting, because now that people have sampled the opportunity, they're gonna resist it going back. So I think there's a push towards liberalization of liquor laws. There's a push towards the consumer wants to get what the consumer wants. And yeah, I think younger people will question and say, what, it doesn't make any sense. I can't order that to get it shipped here. Makes no sense. And so I think I'm optimistic that eventually it will change, but governments will resist. And we just have to keep on asking.
Fighting the good fight.
Keep pushing.
Fighting the good fight.
Yeah. Dave, tell us a little bit about your role at Flora Hall. Do you help at all with the brewing itself? Are you the man behind the helm predominantly with the
Yeah.
administration? Do you have your
I'm
hands in
glad.
marketing a little bit? What do you do?
So I'm glad I'm alone here, because then my people won't have to question, won't have to argue with me. But in terms of beer making, the one and not the one and only time I was involved hands-on with the first few brews, because I hired my head brewer, Rod Hughes, who's an amazing guy. I recruited him. He was living in Vancouver at the time, and he worked for R&B Brewing, and he was a trained chemist. He's got a master's in water science. He ended up moving out west to work in that industry, changed his career path, and went to brew school at UC Davis, and then he was a pro brewer out west. So I recruited him. I brought him out to Ottawa to make beer for us, and he was also interested in bringing one of his brewers from out there. She wasn't here yet, and so I got involved in the first few brews. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, because I got a real hands-on kind of feel for the place that we were creating, and beer is fundamental to the place. But that was the last time I got really heavily involved in beer making. I'm very interested in it. I talk to the brewers all the time about it. I am interested in what they're going to make, what they're thinking about making. But my main role at Flora, to your question, is talking to customers and building relationships with the community. I have amazing people. So the people that work in the kitchen, and the people that work in the brew house, and the people that work in the front are all experienced professionals. They know what they're doing. They need very little from me. But because I've got a lot of experience in business, I'm just steering. I'm just kind of directing and keeping everybody focused, and reminding people why we built Flora Hall in the first place, and why we and how we should evolve Flora Hall over time. Because as much as I want it to be a permanent establishment, I don't want it to be a static permanent establishment. I want it to be changing all the time, because first of all, I like change, and I think everybody likes change. The customers like to come in and see this place that they're familiar with, that they love, but also see, oh my gosh, there's yet more beers coming. The food menu just changed again. The beers are coming fast and furious. I meant, before this podcast, I meant to ask Rod how many different beers he's brewed in the 4 years that we've been open, and I will get back to you with it, because I haven't done it. But I would be. It's going to be 100. It's going to be 120. I don't know. We have some core beers, but he is constantly cranking out new beers. And one thing that I'm not involved in Flora Hall is dictating what beers he makes, or dictating what food Chef Tim makes. They make what they want to make, and that's what makes Flora special too. It makes it always interesting, even for our most regular customers who come, several times a week. They like to see the evolution. Now, that said, there are a few beers that will never be off the menu, and one of them is in my hand right here. It's the English Ordinary Bitter. It's an award-winning beer. It's an amazing beer. It's 3.5%, but packed with flavor.
Drinkable.
And we have this beer board at Flora. It's up on the sort of very high up. And the top beer on there is English Ordinary Bitter, because we put them originally in order of alcohol, and it's 3.5, and it's right at the top. So they go from low to high. But the other reason it's up at the top is because it's never going to come off the menu. It's what I drink. It's what I drink. It's what I love. And it amazes me to see what those guys produce on a weekly basis, and it's just every week, every couple of weeks, there's a new beer. There's something new. It's like, wow, and they're all amazing. And other breweries do this too. And I think, again, back to the sort of what is craft beer. That is craft beer, in my opinion, as well, because a craft maker would not do well if they had to make the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again for the rest of their days. And I don't want that, and I don't want my people to have to do that. So I just say, you know, keep a few core beers on, because we have customers who love those, but all the rest of it is up to you. You make what you want.
Creativity. Some probably one
And
of
it's
the
actually another reason why the channels, back to the, you know, not to go crazy down that path, but a big problem with the channels is that as soon as you get your listing in the LCBO for beer XYZ, you got to supply beer XYZ. Well, that's not what our customers want. I mean, I want to supply beer XYZ, and then I'll supply beer ABC, and you know, and 1, 2, 3, and whatever beer.
Yeah.
I want to just switch it up. So those channels have to embrace that too, and say, oh, okay, here's a Flora Hall spot on the shelf, but we don't even know what's coming. We don't care what's coming. You supply it, and we'll sell it. And so we've used that same philosophy with our licensee customers to say that we want you to have a tap, and we're not bringing different beer every week. Okay, don't get me wrong, because that's not good either. But we'll say, okay, we'll supply the Northeast IPA for a couple of months, but then we would like you to try, and then we would like you to try. And so we're just always trying to get our licensees to mix it up a little bit for their customers. And it's also a way of us not being beholden to a certain beer style, such that they can't brew the beer they want to brew, because, oh, we got to make so much Northeast IPA that we don't have tank time to make other beers. And so I didn't want to get caught into that trap either. So that's sort of also part of our thinking there.
Space and room for creativity. That's
yeah.
That's what it sounds like. That sounds awesome. Actually, to that effect, since you're mentioning different craft beer styles, and naturally, of course, we're checking you guys out prior to the podcast, and one of the things I saw is that you guys have a cask program, which I thought was really cool, because you'll typically maybe see some breweries have like barrel age programs and things like that, but not too many. You don't see too many with the cask program. So maybe you can tell us how that got started and how it's going now.
Yeah, so the cask program probably came because I got hooked on cask beers when I lived in England, and
of course,
the Rod's initial co-brewer was somebody that also loved cask beer, and so she and I kind of got together, and she was interested in making cask beers that were traditional, but she also got crazy with the cask beers and started to make, here's a craft beer, here's a cask that is effectively a margarita. It's sour beer. It's, dry hop sour with a little bit of lime and a little bit of, essence of this and salt and tequila, and people love. Now it's become more difficult, to be honest, during the last couple of years, because cask beers don't last, as you know. And we used to just put a cask on the bar on a Friday night and whack, top, done, and we'd sell it in a heartbeat. Now, because the crowds have been up and down over the last little while, we've set the cask program aside for a while, to be honest.
Fair enough.
Nobody likes to see beer wasted, that's for sure, especially delicious beer. So
True.
we still do them, but we would tend to do something like, let's put the English Ordinary Bitter into a cask because it ages well and it's delightful at room temperature and so forth. So it's very much part of our thinking, but we haven't been as active on it recently. But I'm a big believer, and I think there's an appetite for it in Canada, and we'll definitely come back to it once we get back to more normal customer flow. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I always go for a cask beer. If I see one sitting on the bar at any place, I usually ask what it is, and that's typically my go-to.
It's so interesting.
Yeah,
it's not as carbonated. It's a little warmer, so it's not for everybody. But people try them and they love them. They absolutely love them. People who never thought they would, they're like, I'll try that, and they try it. And maybe it's the beer that they love off tap, and then they try it. Oh wow, it's different in the cask. It's got the same flavor profile, but a different personality, different mouthfeel, different everything. And so and again, that's just another tool for the brewers to use to express themselves. And so I'm always talking to Rod and his guys, like whatever, what else could we add here? Like, you want to add, like, I have a fantasy of having, like, when I built the brewery, I ran lines under the slab because it was a major refit. So we took the whole slab out. It's all new underneath a lot of the good stuff is under the floor. Right? So there's lines running from the tanks in the brew house right to the top.
Oh,
But
nice.
I always wanted to just tap straight from the tank. But we've never been able to do it because we've been very busy. Very fortunately, we've been very busy right from the get-go. So we've never been able to leave beer in the tank for very long. But I still want Rod to get a smaller bright tank or fermenter and just something we could roll into the space and just allow people to get beer straight out of it. Whenever we do tours, and you guys, that's something that you folks are familiar with. There's nothing more thrilling for somebody who's never been in a craft brew house or any brew house than to take a beer right out of like this massive fermenter and just tap and drink. It's wonderful. And so I want to do that. I want them to always be looking for new ways of providing beer experiences to the customer that from a pure business point of view, it keeps the customers excited, but it also just keeps the brewers excited. It keeps everybody excited, and that's what I'm always looking for, those sorts of things. And cask beer was almost part of that.
Amen to that. That's what we live for.
Yeah, that's what we look for. People love new. Like they love familiar, but they love, I'm familiar with this place and this brand, but wow, there's a new beer in a new way, served in a different style. I'm trying it. And that is like, if you really look 40,000 feet about craft beer, that's amazing to me, that so quickly, if you really think about it, it has happened in Canada so quickly. From a time when, you guys are young. When I grew up, we were just drinking 50, Export, O'Keefe, and I love those beers for my own nostalgia. I love those beers, but that's what we were like. Oh, should we get 50 tonight, or O'Keefe, or X, or Blue, or Golden, or Black Label? Like, it was all basically the same beer, but we did it. But now, man, the diversity of beer experiences and that happens so quickly. People who came into our bar even 4 years ago, like, don't like hoppy beers. I don't like hoppy beers, because they'd had a lot of bad hoppy beers, by the way. That's the only reason they don't like hoppy beers. And within a week or two, they're trying these IPAs that Rod and crew were brewing that were so packed with hops, like they were all hops, and yet they're like, this is amazing. This is amazing beer, and they're drinking this Northeast IPA that's jammed with these fruity, juicy hops, but they're super balanced. They're super drinkable and delicious. And so watching people move from conservative beer drinking to I'll drink anything you guys make is a delight. And I love it. And I think it's happened faster than I'm sure anybody would have ever imagined.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave, I think it's fair to say that your time spent in England has influenced your palate and probably the beers that you offer at Flora Hall. You mentioned, of course, the English Ordinary Bitter. Can you tell us maybe a little bit, you could talk maybe more about your time in England, but also maybe just your time abroad in general and how that has impacted maybe the beers you produce, but also your particular favorite styles of beer.
Yeah, I'd say it impacted more the space than the beers. Other than the English Ordinary Bitter, that's the only beer that I'm insistent upon having. The rest of them, I love to try anything he brews. But the space was absolutely informed by my time in England and my time traveling around, because it sort of amalgamated all these different cultures and different places. And what were the things that made me want to go to that bar? What were the things that made me really love my evening in that place? That's what informed the space. The beer style, definitely. The English Ordinary came from 2 years living in the south of England. I was working in the west of London, but I lived a little further west still. The first place I chose to live was chosen because there was a brewery right in the village, and that was back in the day. So it was the early '80s. It was back in the day when, and this, sorry, I shouldn't say it was always like that, but it's changed a little bit in England. But the brewery owned all the pubs. That's how they channeled their beer. So, and you knew when you went to a pub that's owned by the brewery, that's the brewery's right there. And this particular brewery only had like 100 pubs, and they were all within a very short truck drive from the brewery. So the beers were always good. It's called Breaks Beer, and it was amazing. And it had beautiful malt flavor, but tons of flavor, but low ABV. And I like to drink a lot of volume. So a 3.5% beer helps.
That's for sure.
You're standing around the pub and you want to have 6 pints, 7 pints, whatever. I shouldn't, even reveal my habits, but
no judgment here.
You can do it. You can do it. But 6 or 7 Northeast IPAs, as delicious as they are, I can't do that and talk to customers afterwards. I have to go. I have to leave. So I'm super interested in all the beers that we brew, but I mostly drink the lower ABV beers and the tasty beers. But I drink the anything that they produce. I will have, and I will always love, because they're extremely skilled people, and they know how to combine flavors in a way that produce this balance and drinkability. That I try craft beers from all sorts of different places, and I have some real faves. But every time my guys produce a beer, I taste it and I'm thinking, wow, that's real talent. That's real talent. Like I always draw the analogy when I'm doing the brew tours, when I often do some of them in the back there, and people will ask about how hops contribute, or how yeast contributes, or how malt contributes. And they've had experiences, good and bad. And when you're cooking, it's the same thing. You're making a chili for the Super Bowl. If you just go, all in with one spice, it's a terrible chili. But if you get it balanced with it can be super spicy, but it's delicious. And that's the way these beers speak to me. It's like, wow, packed with hops, and yet I don't taste any one of those hops. I just taste this flavor explosion. And so I love those beers too, but I drink I drink this beer. It allows me to continue with my evening and conversations with the customers and so forth.
I love that chili analogy. That's absolutely perfect.
Yeah, I think that's strategic as well. Having a lower ABV, and then you just drink more.
Well, there is that. There is that.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, we delve into the higher octane stuff though, and our customers love. Like when he brews up a double IPA with whatever hop profile, and that's one of the things his guys do great. Is like they'll just produce these double IPAs or these double dry hop beers, and featuring different hops. And a lot of breweries are doing that too. And I think it's wonderful, because it's also educating the customer about different geographies. Like, oh, this beer features Sabro hops, or this beer features, Citra, or this beer features, and they're like, where's that hop from? And why does that hop taste? And I find that to be, again, it's amazing to me that we're talking about beer the way we're talking about beer, the way that wine people used to talk about wine, but without all of the kind of the
snobbery or the.
Yeah, you said it.
Everyone's thinking it. I'm just saying it.
But it's true. I mean, we can talk about beer, and without getting too fancy about it, but people are like, wow. But it's the same conversation. It's like, well, wines are interesting because of the terroir and the grapes, and where do they come from, and how did they get there, and why do they taste like that? And hops are like that, and then yeast is like that, and then and malt is like that. Like we one thing I always point out to my people when we're doing the beer tours is we use ingredients that are faithful to the beer. So this beer that I'm drinking right here, which is the Ordinary, is, it's got Maris Otter, it's got the malt from the UK, the yeast strain is faithful to the UK, and that's the way it should be. And the beers just taste better. And Rod brews a Pilsner, which is also won, I think it won gold in Ontario and silver in Canada, or gold in Canada and silver in Ontario. I can't remember which. And same, it's a Czech, it's a Bohemian style Pilsner using ingredients that are faithful to the style, but produced right here in Ottawa and drunk right here in Ottawa. And it's as fresh gets, and it's just fantastic. Yeah.
Sounds great.
Sorry,
Dave,
Andy.
No, that's okay. Dave, can you tell us how you and maybe Rod, how you balance your particular style preferences with consumer behavior? So do you really focus on what you are particularly interested in, and you think, well, like, this style is really good, whether or not it's the flavor of the month, we know that this style has teeth in it and it will do well? Or do you look at the trends? Do you see that, like, these fruity sours are really in right now, so we should really kind of hop on this trend? How do you choose which styles in that regard?
I think it's as much as I could deny that we worry about what the customers will buy. Of course we worry about what the customers will buy. But I think the beauty of the way that the craft beer consumers are thinking is that they are looking to breweries like Flora and other great breweries around Ottawa and Ontario to actually introduce new things. So we think about seasonality when we're brewing beers. We're like, sours, you mentioned, are extremely popular. There's no question about it. They were popular somewhere else sooner than they were popular here, but they're popular. And that, they're also extremely popular in the summer months. So we will definitely think about seasonality when we're brewing beer. We'll think about customer preference for sure. But we do that with a loose viewpoint. It's not like, okay, our customers love we made a beer called the Mango Lassi IPA way back. Customers loved it. It was amazing. It had mango puree. It had a nice juicy hop profile. It had lactose. It was incredible. We made it. People loved it. But just because they loved it, it doesn't mean we're going to brew that over and over again. But we're going to take note that they love it. And so Rod does. Rod's a better person to ask this question, because he's the one who, his brain and his spreadsheets are the ones that dictate what he's brewing next. But it's as much art as it is business science. It's him thinking about what sells for sure, but it's him thinking about what he feels like making. It's about what ingredients are being consumed at that particular time, and it's occasionally me saying, hey, you know what, I've had so many people in the tap room ask me about that Mango Lassi IPA. Why don't you brew it again sometime? And then he does it. But it really is that is the process. It's very organic, and it's what makes the business so interesting to me at this stage. Just from a pure personal point of view, because up until now I've run companies that are very much driven by corporate customer needs and demands. But even then, it's up to a successful company. Not only knows what their customers are buying now and want now, they got to think about what they're going to want later. And the products we were building back in those days took a long time to build, so you had to really be good at predicting what they're going to want later. But you could only figure that out by talking to the customers. And so the beauty of this business and beer drinking is you're able to talk to the customers all the time. They're right there in front of you. My customers back in the day were all over the world, and they were not all that forthcoming because they were all companies, and they would be very, I'm not sure how much I should tell Dave right now, but I'm going to tell him a little bit. And so we'd have to ascertain and calculate what we should do. Whereas now they are more than happy to tell, especially after a couple of high octane double IPAs. They're more than happy to talk about what they want and what they like and what they'd love to see. And so we're just taking all that in and deciding, what to do next. But that's very much Rod's domain, not mine. I truly don't get involved in that unless, like I said, I have people like banging on me every night for a certain beer. Then I'll just pass that along to him and say, put it on the schedule, like down there, so that I can at least tell these, I love the customers. So I want to make them happy. I don't need to make them happy tomorrow, but I can say it's coming. Okay. That case in point, he just brewed this beer, this Belgian Dubbel, which is not a very common beer style in Ottawa anyway. And he brewed it once before, or he and they, I always say, and didn't brew it again. And people were like, Dave, why don't you have that Dubbel? We loved it. And so I just kept telling him, like, Rod, you got to put this on there. And he did. And he brewed a batch just before Christmas, and it sells, it's gone. We don't can that much, but what we can is gone. And then it's on tap for a while, and then it'll be back someday. And that's what I always say when somebody says, when's that coming back, David? It'll be back someday. It will be back someday. Like, we don't throw the recipes away. We'll make it again someday. I just don't know when. And I love that.
For sure. Hey, and that's the allure, right? The wonderful attractive point of a craft brewery. To come back, find something new, but at the same time, also might be surprised by an old favorite that resurfaces. Mm-hmm. Definitely had that experience myself many times, and it's great. It's super fun. It's awesome. Gets you involved with the brewery a lot more. Yeah, and it's definitely a fun aspect to it all. I did want to ask you one thing, Dave. I know we're sort of coming up near the hour mark. You mentioned, a lot of your own experiences in travels and in local taverns and pubs and things like that really contributed to Flora Hall. But was there ever one spot that maybe stood out to you as the most memorable, and maybe why would that be?
Yeah, that's so. Well, I guess I can say a combination of bars that I was in over the years that had a horseshoe shaped bar definitely connected me to the idea that people go to bars and go to restaurants, go out in order to talk to one another, to talk to the people they're with, yes, but also to talk to one another. So we in Flora have a horseshoe bar downstairs. We have another bar upstairs that's more kind of linear and traditional, but a horseshoe bar means that when you're sitting having a beer, talking to your girlfriend, your wife, your buddy, whatever it is, and then you look across the bar and there are people doing the same thing, but then you might look up another time and they're looking right at you, and then you'll start talking to them across the way. And so that's something. So it's not one particular place, but it's several places that had that feature, and that's baked into Flora from that sort of my own experiences. Especially if you're in there on your own, it's even more conversation. It creates this communal, conversational scenario. You don't have to do it. You can still sit quietly at the horseshoe bar. You don't have to talk to anybody, but if you want to, it's a natural place for that to happen. And then that's the physical part of Flora. And then geographically, yeah, I can't say. I was very lucky to be able to go to so many different countries that, and I love them all for their own right. My roots are English, so yes, that dominated a little bit, but I can remember times sitting in some wonderful places in Tokyo where I'm just sitting there and I don't have a hope of communicating with anybody, but I don't have a hope of speaking with anybody because of the sad part about being English is that you just don't know anything other than English. I could communicate with them because they're all enjoying themselves. They're raising their glasses, and I could sit for hours in those types of places and not say a word, but just still have a great time and enjoy the atmosphere of the place. And that also came into the picture with the creation of Flora. The food,
awesome.
actually, food's also part of that. Food and beer go together. So it was super important to me when I was building the plans for Flora, that we had a proper kitchen, that we're producing interesting food that goes with beer drinking, goes with conversation and so forth. Yeah.
That's awesome. Those are really great points. Yeah, horseshoe bar. I don't think I've actually ever been to a horseshoe bar, so I'll have to come check yours out.
Not a
See what we
craft
can chat
brewery.
with.
Yeah. Not a horseshoe
Yeah.
craft brewery bar. Dave, how much time do you spend at Flora Hall? Are you there all the time? Is it sort of maybe not there all the time?
I'm out all the time. I like to go out. I love spending time in Ottawa. I love talking to people. I love seeing my friends. But in terms of Flora Hall, like, it's because I hired great people and they're experienced, I can manage it, without being there all the time. I just keep the team together. And I spend the time I go to Flora Hall is Thursday, Friday nights. I like to be there because I want to see the customers. I want to talk to the customers. So that's my most significant amount of time, is to be there on Thursdays and Friday nights. And I go there once a week for a team meeting, and I don't have to be there any other time than that, but I like to go there. So I'm there, but my setup is different. I mean, that's why I'm struggling with my words, because my setup is different. I set it up after I had built my career and so forth. And this is, and I hired the right people so they can make that place work. Like, they make the place function, and my contributions can be done without a whole lot of time. So the largest time component of my Flora Hall thing is to be there with the customers, on the customer side of the bar, talking to them, and also for my staff to see. Like, I love being there because they've created an amazing place. So I enjoy going there. When I go there on a Thursday or Friday night, I'm not going to work. I'm just going to Flora Hall, and I'm looking forward to it. Like, I'll be there. Well, it's New Year's Eve this Friday, this particular Friday, but I'll be there, and I would always be there on a Friday night. Yeah,
that's great, and it shows everyone. It's not just, you're not just coming to bark orders or keep an eye on people or anything. You're there to enjoy the establishment that everyone has helped to create and build and work towards. So I think that's great.
Oh man, and I like drinking our beer. I mean, when I go out elsewhere, I'm usually in a place that has our beer. Not strictly from a business point of view, just because I kind of like drinking my beer. But I also try other craft beers. Okay, don't get me wrong. I'm drinking other craft beers all the time too. But when you're out, you like to have a little familiarity.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that's a pretty good place to stop. Dave Longbottom from Flora Hall Brewing in our nation's capital of Ottawa. Garrett and I sadly have not been yet, but we look forward to making our trip to Ottawa soon. Have you been to Ottawa? Sorry, have you been
to Flora Hall?
No, I just been to Flora Hall. Yeah.
Oh, we'll get there. Don't worry.
Dave, we'll let you know when we're coming, and we would love to meet you in person.
Please do. Andy, it's great to talk to you guys. Great to talk to you, Garrett, and thanks for inviting me onto your podcast. It's been a pleasure.
It was a pleasure. The pleasure was ours. We look forward to chatting again.
Yep. Thanks, Dave.
Take care. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all our interviews and beer-related content. Remember, craft beer is here.